The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. Jesus said, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. I love going to my Aunt Kathleen's house. She's my godmother, and I have always loved going to her house. Probably at the beginning it was because my cousins were about my age, and so we would play a lot. But later on, when I was in seminary, living very close to her, I would love going there for the weekends and stuff. It always felt like home, even though it's not where I grew up. She always made it feel like home. The reason I love going to her house is because it is just so easy to be there. So much work has gone into making sure that her house is so easy to navigate. It's clean, and it's easy for us to keep it clean, something I've never been able to accomplish at our own house, possibly because of our kids, but probably also because we're just not that good at it. Her house is warm and inviting. There's a whole closet full of toys for the kids, and while it's certainly easy to make a mess, it's also really easy to put everything away, so you never feel like you're imposing. There's never a moment when we feel like we've made so much of a mess that we are an inconvenience. And if we ever were, she never showed it. She is just so happy to have people there. And she thinks of everything. Making sure there's the right kinds of food on hand, making sure spaces are easy to access, making sure there's coffee, making sure there are snacks. There is so much work that goes into this welcoming atmosphere behind the scenes, but she makes it look easy, and the average person would never even realize that all that work had gone in the first place. I look around at my own messy house and I dream of being able to do that someday. I look at the toys everywhere and I wonder genuinely how she manages it, but if I'm honest with myself, I was always a cluttery person, even before children. And I look at my own house and I understand that her welcome is not accidental. It is intentional. I can easily contrast the welcome I have always felt at my aunt's house with the times I felt like I was intruding on someone else's space. One experience in particular sticks out. When I started seminary, 3 of us 20-somethings were put with someone who was well established in her life. That in and of itself wouldn't have been a problem. I knit, I love to cook, I'm generally a pretty low-key person, and there were many of my more mature colleagues who I thought might have made really good and fun roommates. But before move-in, a roommate called each of us and found out when we were planning to move in, and then she made sure she got there first, so that when we arrived, her furniture was already there and already set up, and she had already taken the biggest room, which was more than twice the size of the smallest room, even though we were all paying the same rent. And we felt, on no uncertain terms, that we were unwelcome guests in her house. She would sigh meaningfully at us if we were cooking in the kitchen or sitting on one of her couches. Even though she had decided that her pots and pans would be in her kitchen, leaving no space for us to bring our own, she was clearly bothered when we actually cooked with them. And by the way, I did know how not to burn a pan even then. We couldn't use the communal spaces because they all belonged to her. We were intruders. We were unwelcome guests. It's often subtle, but if you come into a space and don't feel it's yours, when you don't know which areas are off limits, or worse, if there seem to be no areas that are off limits, or you wonder where the towels are, or whether there's more toilet paper, it gets really uncomfortable really quickly. And often, it's the unintentional small things that make a person feel unwelcome. Our community at Lord of Light has done a lot of work around intentional welcome of our LGBTQ plus siblings. We have done a lot of work to not only convey to the outside through our signs and flags and website that we affirm the gifts and identities of all of God's children, but we have done a lot of work and are continuing to do the work of ensuring our language is inclusive and accessible, that the theology of the hymns we sing are always conveying that all-encompassing love of God for all of God's children, celebrating all of our unique gifts. This is something to truly celebrate. And the ELCA, as a national church body, has done a lot of that work too on the national level. Of course, that isn't always shown in every single congregation, but the fact that our national bishop clearly articulates the love of God for all of God's children, with no exceptions, and for our LGBTQ plus siblings in particular, this is something to celebrate too. But we are still a very white church. We haven't done the work to make sure our spaces feel like home to our siblings of color. We haven't moved out the couch you can't sit on. You know, the one with the clear plastic covering that your grandma used to have in her parlor? We haven't made sure people know that our spaces are their home and not just a place to visit. And if you're going to go about the work of making a space accessible and beautiful, sometimes you have to move all the furniture out before you really understand what the potential is. When Lutheran Campus Ministry at U of M started back in 1917, it was actually a club for students who were already Lutheran. Later, its identity began to flesh out a little bit, and in the 1970s, Lord of Light Lutheran Church was formed in part to be a space of welcome for those who had been previously excluded from the church because of their sexual or gender identity. And now we have a real opportunity to explore all the ways we can extend even further, bearing Jesus' message of grace and welcome to all who are longing to hear it. I'm imagining Jesus speaking in today's gospel not to us, but to those who are seeking a place where they can grow in love and faith. Will ours be a place of welcome? Will we be the ones to welcome those who are seeking a church home? Not just to say, you're welcome to use our space, you're welcome to be in our space, but to say, this is your home too. Right now, we frustratingly can't extend that welcome in the ways we traditionally would, by making sure both folks have plenty of food and making sure our space is welcoming. But we do the work we need to do as a community to address the barriers we may never have noticed before. And we can make sure that our presence online clearly articulates to anyone who sees us that yes, we are a space of welcome, that our mission is to welcome intentionally and fully, so that all God's children have a place to grow, living fully into who God has made them to be, growing alongside of us. Amen.